some of the ideas that they're coming up with is so far ahead of its time, kind of like Galileo's, that it just wouldn't get the traction that it needs. And when we thought about it in the current day situation where information is at everybody's fingertips, it's kind of a tragedy that such a thing is even happening or is even possible.
Welcome to The Heart and Science of Wealth. This is a podcast that provides insightful interviews with family office and high net worth industry experts on how to create extraordinary financial and personal success. Powered by the High Net Worth Women Institute. Here's your host, Steffi Baker.
Hi, everyone. This is Steffi Baker of Heart and Science of Wealth podcast. Welcome. Today we have very special guests talking about their foundation. I'm pleased to welcome Gopi Krishna and Snetu Karania. Welcome.
Hi, Steffi. Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah.
They are a husband and wife team with the most wonderful project. I'm excited to talk to you about this and let you hear from them about what they're doing. They are the founders of the Foundation for Cultural Renewal. And you may wonder, what is this? The question that they lead with is, would Galileo get funded today? That makes you think, doesn't it? Gopi and Snetu believe probably not, because everything needs to have a profit quickly. Yet they realized that the value of having people working on scientific and artistic advances is of great value to society, because that's where big change happens. And back in those days, people like Galileo and Michelangelo and the other artists and scientists had patrons, and they paid for their living expenses. They paid for everything. So they had the time to create wonderful, that took a long time, that were game changers for the world that still exist today. And Gopi and Snetu believe that there's a lot of value in this era to having the same thing going. So Gopi, Snetu, please tell us, what brought this issue to you as so important that you started a foundation to support it?
Yeah.
Sure. My background has been mostly in physics and physics research, and I was looking into solar energy and renewable energy and all of these different topics. And as I was looking into that, I was realizing that there were a lot of researchers that were really talented, but because of various reasons, you do not see them getting the kind of support that, say, a startup would get or somebody in academia would get. Mainly because some of the ideas that they're coming up with is so far ahead of its time, kind of like Galileo's, that it just wouldn't get the traction that it needs. And when we thought about it in the current day situation where information is at everybody's fingertips, it's kind of a tragedy that such a thing is even happening or is even possible. So that was one of the main reasons to reconsider many things and see what can we do to really create an impact in the very basics of science, in the very basics of several different fields. What is needed is exactly the kind of patronage you were talking about. And so that's the direction we went in.
And from my background and doing environmental engineering at Stanford University, I had noticed that something to do solve environmental problems required a multifaceted approach. But the academic life had become so much about just the research in the lab or publishing papers, and there was not too much real interaction with the remaining world or new ideas brought in. I remember doing a project where a scientist in India had done something really good, and I wrote about that, but there was no traction just because it was not a big name or they didn't have 10 papers about it. So that reminded me of the same thing that Gopi has explained, that unless you check all these boxes and have all these things done, your idea is not even valued, but it could actually be a game changer if houses were constructed in that manner with respect to water management. So kind of the same way, and I have a background in nonprofit world. I'll go into that a little bit later.
So then the next obvious question is, why the two of you and why now to do this foundation to support this idea?
Yeah, so as I was saying, I have a background in the nonprofit world. I actually started volunteering for a nonprofit in my first week at Stanford. And I volunteered there for 12 years, taking up different roles, finally getting to the board of directors. And I noticed that we're always solving societal issues at the downstream level. And no matter how much you try, it's always just a drop in the ocean. So I was trying to do something that is more upstream, where it can have an impact over a long period of time, whether I am alive or not. So it's something that you start and it keeps growing. And also it reaches multiple facets, not a very narrow path, which is what I noticed that was there in my previous nonprofit. So that was the reason this sounded much more upstream and long term.
And so in addition to the upstream part, another thing in the whole scientific stream is we have almost reached a sort of crisis point in the sciences. And it's been acknowledged in multiple ways, even, when you go online and you listen to YouTube and you have all these talks being given, like Sabine Hassenfelder's talking about, is science collapsing or what is happening? And when you look at all of that, you realize that one of the reasons that has happened is because post the two world wars, science became big science. And what does that mean? That basically means enormous funding gets involved and huge institutions get involved in scientific development. So both the government and the private industry think at a much higher scale in order to get things moving. But a large institution also comes with tremendous bureaucracy. It also comes with tremendous institutional pressures, which does not allow a maverick scientist to just go off and do his own thing. For example, Faraday back in the day was somebody who did not even have a formal education. He picked up his science just binding books and reading the books that he was binding as an apprentice. And then he just started doing his experiments as a loner, more or less. And that individual streak has almost no traction today because everything is dependent on large institutions. So that's no wonder that people are wondering, what's going to happen with science? Why are we hearing all day long about this tech and that new device and this new device? And we can barely name a handful of scientists from the last 20 years. So that is like a crisis which demands an answer. And that is what we are trying to do. We are trying to provide that answer. We're trying to say, look, there are indeed people who are not simply cranks, but actually very talented, and they're bringing in many ideas that can go very far. And having studied the history of science as well, and interacting with history of science professors as well across the world, that is the kind of conclusion I could come to, that even the institutional people are not knowing where to go. And so that is why we wanted to create this. We go to the root of the problem. Why are we not getting new individual scientists and breakthroughs at the same level we had a century ago? Because there is no patronage for it. If without a product, without a return on investment, which is very immediate, nobody is thinking 2 generations down the line. But that's what we need. That's the kind of vision we need. And only then can we do something in this direction. And that's why we try to do it with our science and environmental background. And that's why now.
That makes sense. That's a really good point. Well, kids don't play outside anymore, and people don't tinker with things. You don't see people, guys in particular, working on cars or building things. They're not working with their hands anymore. And I think this is a byproduct of the rise of the knowledge and information economy. And you don't need to do it. And actually, it might even be looked down upon if you're working with your hands. Yet this is what they were doing during the Renaissance, was all kinds of things hands-on. And that's what's missing. This is awesome. So tell me, when did you start the foundation, and how? Describe some of the projects that you've had so far.
So we started the foundation way back in 2019, January of 2019. And over the time, we have funded several people, some researchers in physics, astronomy, somebody doing some good work in philosophy, economic science. We've funded a few artists who are great in, say, poetry or painting or color pencil drawing. Some social workers who found really different ways of dealing with social problems than the cookie cutter method. And then we've also funded one organization, a medical research organization out in Chicago, who's working on innovative cancer treatments. So we've kept our funding stream very varied. The people we've funded. And a lot of these people are located all across the world. We've also had few small conferences, one right here in Salt Lake City in April 2019, where we had about 7 to 8 researchers fly in, share their work. We wanted them to meet each other. Few of them were online. It was a small size conference just so that these researchers can meet each other. And then we did another small one in New York. But then, just like the rest of the world, because of COVID, we had to slow down on some of our activities. But now we're ramping back up.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, I would also like to say, like, one of the criteria that we use to select people in order to make it even more concrete, I can say, for instance, if you have one of the most common medical issues, today, people are aware that heart issues is probably the number one, pretty close to being the number one issue in health today in the modern world. Now, there are many ways in which you can tackle this. And many people who want to fund heart health and cardiac health are not necessarily aware of these different approaches. One is, of course, you can say, you know what, there is this small group over here which is helping people get pacemakers. I'm going to help them, And then you can go a level up. You can say, you know what, who gives the pacemakers? The people in the hospitals and the patients, they need money for things other than pacemakers, for instance. And so now you may help fund patients. So that's another higher level up. And then somebody else may say, you know what, even if the patients show up, the treatment they receive has to be good. So we have to be funding research in that. And then they would probably give to a hospital or a medical school and, give a donation for the endowment or something like that to give to an institution. But then what about ahead of that as well? You might have somebody who has a completely different understanding of the way the heart functions and the blood functions. So that changes the game, not only for the medical schools, but for the hospitals and the patients and the common person on the road. So that is way upstream. That is like the pebble that kicks off the avalanche. And that's our focus. That's the kind of person we want to be funding and helping and nourishing over quite a long time so that their work can enter the world.
Why do you think there aren't more people concerned about the long term?
I think it's just the way people are trained in the modern age, where everything in the digital world, we get an immediate response. We click a button, we can read anything in Wikipedia or Google search. We can find anybody on Facebook. We can just know everything very quickly. And that, I think, has kind of trained us to expect everything to happen so fast. The other thing is, in the Renaissance time, the mode of life was different. So there was a place for economy, there was a place for culture, there was a place for the church, there was a place for all these things. But over the centuries, the economy has gotten kind of a foothold on every other aspect of life. So profit motive has become the main driving force. So again, nobody's waiting for a profit after they are gone. They want it immediate. So because of all these different reasons, I think people are mostly looking at short term. And the one other very important reason is because we've kind of forgotten or lost patience or the fulfillment feeling. We want us to feel good immediately and over, so that we feel better about ourselves. That gets a higher importance compared to another goal long term. That's another reason I think people prefer to get immediate results, immediate returns, immediate everything.
Yeah. One example is, okay, you're having a lot of pollution in the city. And so your mind immediately goes to, okay, how do I take all this pollution and just take it away? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the research that gets funded is, okay, take the carbon and sequester it, put it back somewhere, just get rid of it, get rid of the carbon dioxide or things like that. Those are the mindset. It's not wrong. It just, that's the level at which we deal with it. And we don't go all the way back. We don't say, wait a minute, what was the process that generates pollutants? What can we do over there? That is not the mindset in general. It's just too costly to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And even on the other side, like say somebody in a health situation, if someone suffers from something close in the family, somebody who is wealthy generally tends to go only for that disease. That's where the help goes and the support goes. But many times, many diseases are interconnected. So you might give money for multiple sclerosis, but that doesn't help solve diabetes. You may give for diabetes and help solve cardiac problems. But if you give support to somebody who's working on a different way of dealing with health itself, that cascades into everything. So it's both the vision, the emotion, the profit motive, all of these things kind of entangle to make everything very short term.
Yeah, I can also give another example from my art class. 7 years ago when I joined, we used to have a lot of students in the color pencil drawing class. But over time, the number of students have dropped, but we still find more students who come to learn, say, pottery or watercolor painting. That's because, again, you can finish a piece in one evening, but something like an oil painting or color pencil art, which requires layer upon layer of work and patience, we have seen the number drop drastically, especially in the kind of the younger generations. Again, it's like, it's easy in a digital media to just draw something and create it really quickly and have a satisfaction. But this thing of nurturing and growing something, that feeling has been kind of disappearing.
Yeah, the short-term focus seems to be, the people aren't able to concentrate and focus all that long anymore. And I think that's because of, the computer and the phone and the social media give us those dopamine hits. And it's just everything. It's just instant society. And also what I do like about your points of let's take a longer view are also, when you solve one problem, you typically create 3 more unintended problems. Whereas if you're sitting back and thinking and really looking at the big picture and taking your time to do it, I think there's more of a chance that you're not going to create those knock-on problems.
Yeah, and we can see that that reminded me, even in the environmental field, right? Everybody today thinks, oh yeah, carbon dioxide is really bad. Let's just get rid of fossil fuels. Let's get solar. But then that created another problem. Now there are so many solar panels lying, which are no longer usable. And there's a huge disposal problem, which is causing so much contamination in the groundwater and all this heavy metal. Again, it's like we can think one step and then cause another cascade of issues. So the way of thinking itself has to be questioned.
Yeah. To me, this is really thinking about science and art and, development of culture and society and technology and all these things at a 30,000-foot view that just isn't being done. I was so interested to hear what you were doing because you don't hear people taking the long view very often. Other than the family offices tend to take the long view. And hey, family offices, if you're interested, this is a great place to fund change in the world, because I know that family offices can take that longer view. Some of them have a 100-year investment horizon, and for some of them it's perpetuity. So they're known as patient capital, and I think this would be very attractive to them. Now, you had mentioned about the events you ran here in Salt Lake City, where you live, and I want to hear about the big special event that you're planning in Silicon Valley in October. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is going to be a big event, October 31st to November 2nd in the Bay Area at the Computer History Museum. we are having what's called the Renewal of Science conference. So for this one, all these kind of people that we have been talking about so far, really talented people, both from within academia and from outside, about a dozen of them will be coming and giving presentations at the museum. And they will also have pretty huge live exhibits as well to demonstrate some of the concepts, the completely new concepts that they are bringing to the table. And the reason we are doing that in that way is we wanted to cover multiple fields of science which are normally just siloed off into their own little boxes. So we are looking at astronomy, we are looking at electromagnetism, everything that goes into our entire electrical grid and motor technology, all of that, and Wi-Fi and whatnot, everything is affected by how you understand electromagnetism. There'll be talks about heat, and because understanding thermodynamics is literally the key to unlock whatever we are talking about with regarding to climate. And then there will be biology, evolutionary biology, cardiac sciences. And then, of course, we also have somebody who's worked with creating and sculpting forms in a almost Renaissance fashion, but using scientific vibrations and looking at the properties of liquids that can generate various biological forms just through sound. And so completely, melding the forces of art and science without in any way sacrificing the scientific method, and in fact, trying to upgrade it. That's the focus of the Renewal of Science conference. And yeah, anybody who's in the Bay Area and anybody who's not, they should be taking a look at that and come join us for the 3-day experience to just see how these things are done.
That sounds fantastic. It sounds very Star Trek. I watched Star Trek. I used to really like The Next Generation. And it's amazing at what in the future things could be like. You order your food from the replicator or you play in the holodeck. And these people that are coming to demonstrate these wonderful inventions and I don't know what to call them, but it sounds so fascinating. And I'm hoping to be there because I used to volunteer when I lived in Silicon Valley at the Computer Museum. So I can tell you all, it's an awesome place to have an event and it should be wonderful. Well, we should wrap it up for this session. Now, if people want to get in touch with you to find out how they can get involved, I know you're looking for maybe advisory board members, for donors, and for people to come to the conference. How do people get in touch with you? And then tell us about registering for the conference too.
Yeah, so all of the information is available on our website, which is www.renewalofculture.org. And then once you go there, we have several tabs. One is called Renewal of Science, which is all about the conference. We have a 3-minute intro video over there. We also have the ticketing link and all of that. And then if you're looking to support us, we have a support tab. You could PayPal us or you could send us a check, whichever way. And then just to get in touch with us, we have our email on the website, coordinator@renewalofculture.org, or we also have a contact form on the website. So yeah, once you get to the website, all of the information is right there. What we have done in the past is also right there.
And we would definitely like to launch this conference as a way of creating an independent scientific group with both researchers and students and mentorship programs and internship opportunities and courses and all of the rest of it, so that a different kind of science can actually continue onwards.
I love this so much. Your vision is amazing. And I am personally grateful for your work on this area. And I'll be watching to see how you're doing. So thank you so much for being here, everyone. This has been Gopi and Snetu of the Foundation for Cultural Renewal. I'm Steffi Baker. Thank you so much for attending this episode of Heart and Science of Wealth. See you next time.
Thank you, Steffi. Thanks for all the support.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed listening to the podcast, please subscribe and rate it. To learn more about the High Net Worth Women Institute, please visit our website at www.highnetworthwomen.com. Thank you.